I was my grandpa's favorite, his namesake. He used to take me to ball games, used to show me his baseball cards. He used to be, he was a World War II veteran. He was on the USS O'Bannon. He was on a destroyer. He had a little, I guess you call it a locker box that the Navy guys had. And then, on the very top was all of his knives. And then underneath that was a secret compartment where all of his baseball cards were. And then you could flip it up and you could see his pinups pictures that he had when he was on his ship. And he'd take me back there and show me those things. I don't think he was supposed to, but he'd do it. Looked like Santa Claus. In fact, I remember, Christmas time, he'd have his Santa Claus outfit and his whiskers, and, all my friends would be, getting on his lap, and that's Santa Claus, that's Santa Claus. But deep down, nah, that's my grandpa, That's my grandpa, and I remember, boy, he loved me. I'd sit on his lap, I'd pluck out his whiskers, and he called me a bad word, but what he really meant was, I love you. And I knew he loved me. And I remember that I was in the science club, and I was in junior high in the science club, and we took a field trip to the hospital. And while we were there, we were back in the lab, and they were showing us how things were spinning around. They were showing us the blood samples, and I looked up at the entryway, and I there was a window in the door, and my dad was standing there, and I thought, I just knew immediately. Something in me just knew something bad happened. My dad took me down to the emergency room, and we walked through the doors, and it really wasn't rooms. It was just partitions of white sheets is what it seemed like. And I remember opening up the white sheet and walking through, and there was my grandpa, and his voice was cracking, and they had him all wired up, and he said my name, and you could tell that he loved me. And I've thought so many times about that moment, and I bet you that he prayed that he could just see his favorite grandson again. At least I think so. Walked out, went to the chapel where the rest of my family was, and minutes later had a second heart attack, and it killed him. The moment they told us, my grandma passed out right then. Just wham, hit the ground. It was devastating. And from that point on, I remember my uncle, who was a Christian. I got in his truck, and he took me to my grandma's and my grandpa's house. And I remember on the way, he told me, he says, this is going to make you a better person. I can't remember anything else he said, but he loved me. Surrounded by family members that loved me, but none of it mattered at that moment because my grandpa died. Oh, was I sick? Physically sick. I got so sick that I couldn't go to school. I thought I was sick. I didn't even understand what was wrong with me. I was so scared of death from that point on. For the first time in my life, I knew what death was. I had seen people die. Grandma, like a great-great-grandma died, and maybe even a great-grandpa died, but never before had I experienced what death did, how it separates us from people we love. And I remember I would go and lay on my great-grandma's couch, and I would lay there, and she would try to share scripture with me, like here in John chapter 14, where it says, let your heart not be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. And I remember this verse. She said, in my Father's house are many, she used the word mansions because that was King James. In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come back. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself. And where I am, there you may be also. She meant that to comfort me. That didn't work. Nothing worked. I remember crying myself to sleep every single night because I thought I was going to die in the middle of the night and never see my parents again. And I thought I had AIDS. I thought that the Russians were going to nuke us for sure overnight. I thought a spider would bite me or the house would burn down or something would happen. I was sick, spiritually sick. And going to a counselor or a psychiatrist in my family, wrong. That would never happen. A psychiatrist was a quack as far as we were concerned. And one day my dad looked at me and he said, "You want to go see the preacher?" I said, "I don't care." So Pontiac 6000, I think, was the car we owned at that time, a brown one, and my dad drove me to the church there. And I remember he parked like way away from the. My dad never went to church, and he parked all the way down at the end, away from the door. And I remember walking into the pastor's the door, and knocked on the door, and the pastor opened the door. And we went into his study, and he began to tell me about heaven. And he said, in heaven there's nothing dead. There are not any. There's not any grass that's dead. There's not any. The lion will lay down with the lamb in heaven, and absolutely they will not harm each other. Well, ask me if that helped me. I mean, that he cared, that helped. But nobody could do anything to help me. Like I said, I would cry out in the middle of the night, "Mom, Dad, I love you," because I just wanted them to know I loved them before I died that night. True story. And then after the speaking with the pastor was over, he called me over to the door and he said, "I'm going to pray for you." And he put his hands on me. Now, when this guy prayed, he put his hands on my shoulders and he shook me and he prayed so loud. And I have no idea what he said, but when he was done, I walked out, walked down the sidewalk, got in the car. My dad said, "You feel any better?" I don't know. Went home that night, went to bed. I woke up the next morning. I didn't cry myself to sleep. I was healed. God healed me. I was no longer afraid. Sad if somebody died? Oh yeah. The idea of me dying, being sad, sure, separated from family members, maybe not accomplishing all the work that I wanted to accomplish while I was on earth, but afraid? No. God healed me. And God can do the same thing for you. And that's the power of prayer.